So here we are, and I'm excited to present. We have Dr. K in the studios, as his fans have been calling him now for a while. I think the name is starting to stick, and I'm really excited about this interview. Hello to all of you. Aaron, we got the Third Eye Edifice. We've got Quinn. We've got Mexico. We've got Aaron. Welcome to all of you guys. It seems we've got another couple of people in here. Welcome to you too. Don't feel shy. Jump into the chat, say hi. We've got a family atmosphere going here. It's all good. And how's my voice sounding? Is it sounding good to you people on YouTube? I hope. And I hope it's sounding good enough for you, brother Dr. K.
You sound great, Franklin.
Excellent. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. K. You've all seen him in action. He is a grounded, solid, earth stable mountain brother. That's how I feel his energy. He's like the mountains, his mountains feet, and clear, concise. I love the way he speaks. He always thinks before he speaks. He's a very conscious and conscientious thinker and speaker, and he's got some wonderful experience to share with us. We're going to do an expose, a little bit of a look into the man behind the man, to get an idea of what inspires someone to become the Dr. K. Also, we're going to talk about his mystery school. Very excited to hear about the KunamiKodes experience. And of course, he does these wonderful grimoires. He did one for me, and I'm still actually chunking on bits of it. So those of you that haven't had a grimoire done, this is the place to get it. Dr. K is the man to talk to. There's also so much more to him. You know, he's going to tell us the story. I'm going to try not to get in his way. Without any further ado, Dr. K, the stage is yours, brother.
Love, peace, and power, Franklin. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. That is truly, truly a gift. Love, peace, and power to everybody in the chat, everybody watching, everybody who will watch and listen. Thank you for coming. I am thankful that something in me reflects the positivity and love that hopefully reflects in you, which is why you're here.
Sorry, I had to get my frankincense. Never leave home without your frankincense is my motto. And of course, me old crystal. I love my crystals. So, yeah, where do we start? Dr. K and I haven't even rehearsed anything. It seems to be the vein, the spirit of the way that we move. The round table has never had a rehearsed conversation. We literally just connect on the moment. And this is how we are rolling here with Dr. K. So Kilele is his name, but Dr. K is what people are calling him. And I think it's so appropriate because he's got that doctor brain, you know. Where would you like us to start, dear brother?
Well, I suppose we should start at the beginning, or as close to the beginning as we can get thus far, right? My name, my given name, I want to clarify this because my name is very unique. My given name is Kilele Keanu Huff. That is my full given name. You probably won't hear me mention the Huff too much because that's just my full name. And you don't necessarily want that out there, but even me giving it out here should kind of tell you a little bit about me. My father was from Ohio, but his grandmother was from Kenya. He had an obsession with Superman, whose real name is Kal-El from Krypton, who took on the earthbound name of Clark Kent. Our tribe is from Kenya, and it is the Kikuyu. He mixed Kikuyu with Kal-El and got Kilele Keanu. There are many meanings to it, but I can't find a proper translation other than the one that I create. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, 1980, December 24th. And my birthday is very peculiar. When you understand how numerology works, when you understand why you chose, or at least begin to understand why you chose, because there's many reasons. You'll understand why you chose the birthday that you did. December 25th is Christmas. December 24th is the last day that the sun rests at the lowest point in the Southern Cross. This is where we get the analogy of the sun resting for, or the sun being dead for 3 days. That is very, very significant to me, and it has been throughout my entire life, but I didn't realize that until I came to a certain point. You don't really understand or wield power until it comes to a point. The first point I can remember in my early life was religion. Religion always drew my attention. And it wasn't people's reaction to it. It wasn't the fanfare or the songs in the church or the singing or people catching the Holy Ghost. It was the idea that you could talk to God. I remember that being a very, very powerful early thought. And when I realized it was something you could essentially choose to do, my grandmother and my mother had a habit of telling me about my mouth and my attitude. From the time I could understand, I was an arguer, but I only argued, at least so I thought, I only argued when I knew I was right. The issue was I was right a lot when it came to my grandparents, so much so my grandfather bought me an Encyclopedia Britannica set when I was 5 years old. He got tired of my questions. I still asked him, but he would tell me to go and read and find out and then come back and tell him the answer to my question. So much so I used to walk around with a list of questions in my pocket. And I wouldn't ask anyone. I was ashamed. I didn't want to ask any adult or anyone older than me. And I couldn't ask anyone younger than me because that didn't make any sense. You know, like kids weren't supposed to know anything. This was the idea. Mind you, of course, I'm growing up in the 80s. You know, this is before the internet was mainstream, before we had these devices, and you actually had to go to a library and read. And I did at a great deal. And I was always curious, and I always asked questions. I went to seminary school up until I was 16 when I started hitting growth spurts and started getting a little bit bigger. I'm currently 6'4" and 230, but I used to be somewhere between 350 and 400, especially when I was a defensive tackle. But that was my energy when I came out of the ministry because you get in trouble when you don't preach or teach according to a certain doctrine, especially here in the West. Um, it doesn't matter what the doctrine is. If you have a 501c3 tax exemption status, you teach according to a doctrine that is given to you, not that you believe in, not that you necessarily even agree with, but one that provides you a building and access to funds. People know that at this point. You know, I'm not trying to convince anyone. You have to follow your own intuition. But that, at a very early age, led me away from religion, at least organized religion, because that's not the way it works. You know, you can't teach enlightenment. You can't teach discernment. You can't teach connection to God. But if you look at the court system, if you look at the church, they operate in the exact same way. You have to have this mediator. You have to have this moderator to speak for you, to plead for you. And that's not the way reality actually works. It's so far away from the truth. It's so easy to get lost. And that's what I essentially did. I studied. I was self-taught for a very, very long time. And that leads to isolation. It leads to asked for trauma that you don't realize that you asked for until much later in life. Because when you challenge norms, when you challenge societal foundations, you're going to have resistance. People are going to look at you like you're insane. We can see that so easily now in this day, but I'm talking about 20 years. I'm talking about 30 years ago even. It was a completely different time. You're talking about being completely ostracized. That went from making me cold to giving me a certain charge, giving me a certain power. That fueled my study. But that study took me quite a few different places. I can rant and I can go on and on. I don't want to. I want to get to your question or any question that you may have or anyone in the chat.
Okay, so you mentioned you were in the ministry, which is fascinating, and obviously for obvious reasons you met with a series of challenges. So you were inspired for knowledge as a very small child, but you must have been inspired for more than just mere knowledge to go to the ministry. There must have been a desire to help people. There must have been some kind of burning. What was it that drove you to the ministry?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. There were a great deal of things that drove me to that. Detroit in the early 80s I remember it being beautiful. I remember my neighborhood being incredible. For anyone who would like to see what that looks like today, we have this thing called Google Earth. If you go to Google Earth and you type in 2497 Tyler, Tyler, Detroit, Michigan, you will see my house that I grew up in. You will also see that to the immediate right of that house, there are no houses. This is because in the early 80s, once crack cocaine hit, the city had a policy. If your residency was caught in the sale or distribution of crack or any drug for that matter, your house was bulldozed. No ifs, ands, or buts. So you can see on my street that my house still stands and the house that we owned and rented out next to it still stands. And there's a few on down the other way, but in the other direction, there's absolutely no houses. So suffice it to say, it was a very dangerous place. My grandfather, he lived through the riots in '67. He sat on our porch with a shotgun night after night, you know, um, long after it was over because people weren't used to that kind of brutality. And the drugs had really just started to come in. So you had a real issue. That didn't go away when I was born. And the fact that my grandfather had three daughters and I was his first grandson, he poured a lot into me when he realized at the very least, my curiosity. He didn't spare any expense when it came to educating me, sending me to camp, sending me abroad, buying me whatever book you can imagine. That's as far as it went. It didn't translate in other areas. I don't want to give people the wrong idea here. But when it came to my mind, he spared no expense. So I went to private school. Um, the ministry was something I could put my passion in that everyone around me would celebrate me for until I started asking questions. So what drove me to it was the fact that I was very good at it. I was able to retain information. A lot of people read the Bible or read the Quran. In Islam, you are you are supposed to memorize the Quran. Christians don't have that same tenet. When you come across someone who actually has it memorized, you kind of get this I don't know, maybe adoration is what I used to feel, which would drive me to study more. But when you truly put someone to the test, to a large degree, they don't know what's in the book. So when I would go to my grandfather and ask him about, griffins or unicorns or leviathans in the Bible, he didn't know anything about that. My mother didn't know anything about that. And my mother would sang in the choir, you know. And my mother was always big in the church, but they didn't study. They didn't read. And then when you ask a question, there's this kickback because you're not supposed to. It took a very long time before I understood that. So when I understood that, that drove me away from it, but it didn't drive me away from the study. It actually drove me deeper into the religious text, because one thing about becoming a pastor, you have to study everything. They don't really tell you that, even though you're not going to talk about Shiva. You're not going to talk about um, the Prophet Muhammad. You're not going to talk about the Temple Mount, but you need to know about all of these things because they're all talking about the same people. Once you understand that, you have to ask questions, but you are not paid to ask questions. That began my fundamental fight with this world, because you have to, in order to be something, you have to align with something. I don't align with too much. I align with numerology. Numerology is very prevalent in all religions. It's prevalent in everything. You can't name anything that is not numerical. So when I realized that my grandfather used to play the lottery to a great deal, and he would win 3 and 4 times a week. And I'm talking about like the 3-digit and the 4-digit, not Powerball or anything like that, even though there are methods for that as well. It was so normal, I didn't think anything of it. But when I look back at his journal, when I look back at this book of ciphers, when I realized that he was a Freemason and he was also a 33rd degree and he was a Shriner, then certain things began to make sense. But still, I was lost. So the point of breaking came when I began losing family members. When he passed of cancer in 1996, my mother never recovered. She was a daddy's girl. It was completely devastating. When I had stillborn twin girls when I was 18, that kind of was like the straw that broke the camel's back. My mother passed less than a year later of breast cancer. And then my grandmother passed in February of 2001. I was done. I was 20 years old. I had a gang and a complete vast amount of knowledge that I could do nothing with, that meant nothing to me because of what I had suffered. That was pushing me away. It was pushing me somewhere else. I moved to Pennsylvania. I followed my intuition because I was being haunted by ghosts or by spirits. I think I told one person that. I told my older brother that. And he did not ridicule me, but it was a very hard thing to talk about because actual spiritual things, if you talk about spirits to let's just say a proper Christian. I'm going to keep bringing up Christians because that was primarily what I was dealing with. I'm not trying to make anyone feel any kind of way. I don't care how proud of how powerful in Jesus and protected by the blood you may be. If someone's going to move into a house and right before they do, they're told that there's spirits in the house, they're not going in that house. All that blood protection of Christ just went out the window. Why is that? What are we running from? Because we all do it. I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't do it. But we have to understand the mechanism that causes us to wire ourselves to write our life stories in that way. That ultimately led me to what I do today, but that's me playing a whole lot of hopscotch.
Wow, brother. Straight into the deep end, huh? A lot of revelation there, a lot of bravery, a lot of honesty, a lot of depth. And you dive straight into the other side. Obviously, this is the kind of thing that drives someone towards ministry of any sorts, I imagine, because that's really what it's about. And I suppose it's probably a good time to ask you, because you mentioned to me you've had a number of brushes with the other side yourself, personal experiences. Would you mind sharing a little bit of this with us, if that's appropriate?
Sure. That is a very, very defining series of moments and something very, very essential to our discussion today. Obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be here, right? I drowned when I was 6. I was gone for, I want to say something around 2 minutes, maybe. At least that's what I was told. I remember absolute bliss. I remember people calling out to me that I knew, and I had absolutely no idea who they were. It was incredible. And then I remember coming back in my body and being completely angry. I remember because I think my mom bought me like Taco Bell or something to like try to calm me down. Um, I was angry to be back. Um, I've had a series. I've had a lot of brushes of death. I was a bouncer. Um, I did security and bodyguarding and things for a long time. That didn't equate to much besides noticing the point of when your life flashes before your eyes. There's a sequence that you see, depending on how you live your life is going to depend on, or is going to determine how many brushes with death you actually have, right? But when you have more than one, hopefully you begin to notice that what flashes in front of your eyes changes. So the most recent brushes have been in 2019. I started a very long and very traumatic breakup with my then my ex at the time, and initially one of the causes I think played a large part in heart failure that I suffered in December 2019. As a result of that, I could no longer work. I've worked my entire life, even when I was I've led a few different lifetimes. You know, I was a hustler in the street for a while. Um, I've done a few different things. But when this happened, I could no longer work. I could no longer provide. I had to begin fighting for disability. That was a completely new world. At the same time, COVID hit, so a lot of things shut down. In September of 2021, I picked up a little bit too much weight. There was a relative who was in a wheelchair suffering from multiple sclerosis. He was 88 at the time, and he couldn't get from the wheelchair to the bed. So I'm not thinking at all. I'm not supposed to, at the time, I wasn't supposed to pick up over 80 pounds. I think he weighed like maybe 140. I picked him up, no issue, put him in the bed, didn't feel strain at all. And my heart went into afibrillation. I had no idea at the time what that was, but I already had a defibrillator. So that means I had a heart monitor by my bed, right? So if anyone was watching and noticed something wrong, then they would have contacted me or whatever. But that was not the case. Over the next 3 days, my lungs filled up with fluid, and it was very, very, very hard to breathe. The morning of the fourth day, I called the ambulance, went to the hospital, and whatever they did to me, I ended up brain dead on a ventilator with my organs failing. They called the family, told them I was passing. They came down. Someone was able to pull a favor and get me life flighted out of that hospital to Duke in North Carolina. I died twice on the flight there. They didn't have the facilities that I needed. So I went north to VCU. Shout out to everybody in VCU. Love you always. I died twice more on the way to VCU. And then I passed once more once I got to VCU, and then I was in a coma for about 3 or 4 days. And when I came out of that coma, I had gained like 60 pounds almost instantaneously because of the fluid buildup and not being able to, my kidneys not being able to pump the fluid out and my heart not having the strength to pump it. It was a whole mess. I've got videos and for anybody who may enjoy that kind of thing. I don't know anybody who would, but it's in the Telegram. I had tubes everywhere, and then I had to have heart surgery, and I got a heart pump. I have a Iron Man Tony Stark heart, right, with a power pack. And the numerology of how that came about on September 21st to my finally being able to come home October 27th of 2021 with a kind of a new lease on life. That was incredible. But before I got out of the hospital, I had one more brush. After my surgery, I had to have a blood infusion, platelets, they call it, high plasma. I am O negative, by the way, one of the oldest blood types on Earth, and I don't have any allergies. Some way, somehow, I had an allergic reaction. I didn't feel anything physical aside from being extremely cold, even though my nurse told me I was burning up. My monitors and my vitals started plummeting. The last I looked, it was 32/16, I believe. I just closed my eyes and just said, okay, it's over. When I opened my eyes, I saw Magic Lacroix. Love, peace, and power to Magic Lacroix. He is one of my greatest spiritual teachers. He was standing in the duat. It was purple, it was magenta, it was welcoming. He was holding Rafiki's staff. For anyone who may be familiar with The Lion King, if you remember Rafiki, Asante Sana, Squash Banana, Mimi Uno, Mimi Opana, that is Rafiki. He was the shaman for The Lion King, right? That staff that he was holding, Magic Lacroix was holding that. He said, it's not your time, turn around and go back. I turned around and I went back. I didn't ask any questions. I opened my eyes and I was back on the table. I was in my hospital bed. I was stabilized and things were normal. I'm telling you that story because I can prove it. The next morning, I was given a visit by a service dog named Maggie. The pictures I posted those in my Telegram also. Maggie proved a point because when you journey through the underworld, Asar or Osiris travels with Anubis or Yanipu or Ampu. So that dog was a very, very, very big confirmation. But as soon as she left, I had a visitor by the name of Mr. Collins, aka the staff had named him Mr. Superman. Mind you, the story I told you about my name. Mr. Collins walked into my room and told me a story. What got my attention immediately was the fact that he was walking and carrying and using Rafiki's staff. He had been in my room, which was room 126, which adds up to a 9, a year prior, exact same day. He needed a heart and he needed a kidney. Moments before he was to have surgery, something fell through, something went wrong. He didn't get discouraged. He didn't lose his faith. He didn't blink an eye. The next day, instead of just the heart, he got the heart and the kidney that he needed. The next day, I don't need to explain how exponentially insane that is because that doesn't happen. People wait for years when it comes to organs. He had successful surgery. He built himself back up by exercising in the hospital and he went home. And he continuously comes back to visit people in the ward going through similar issues and trauma, but specifically anyone who's in that room. So the fact that he went through the exact same thing that I went through at twice my age and took that to mean that it would be an inspiration to others led to my download of what I call KnamiKodes. When you do self work, you have to examine everything. You have to examine your shadow. You have to examine your trauma. It is your trauma that makes you who you are. It is what you do not remember that makes you who you are. I want you to think about that for a second. Because who are you without your pain? Who are you without your trauma? Ultimately, it's what drives you. It can be what drowns you, but perspective is going to be paramount, always. So when I examined some of my own trauma, when I went to my own childhood, one thing that brought me great, great comfort was video games. They became a very, very good pastime, a very good friend. But I remember when the game changed, right? When the game changed for me was 1986, I want to say. I was playing Nintendo and I was reading Nintendo Power, which was a magazine, and there was a cheat code for a game called Contra. Contra was a side-scrolling shoot 'em up that was incredibly difficult, especially if you were new to it. There was a code called the Konami code. Up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, start. When you enter that code, it would give you 30 lives instead of 3. So it became a lot easier. Now, with the skill that you've learned, you could essentially beat the game without the code because you had knowledge of what laid ahead of you and how to move and what risks to take, what guns you might want. Someday somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to understand what I'm saying. The code is you. It is quantum entanglement at its finest. It is magic. That was the first magic spell I learned. So when you understand that we live in this simulation, then you understand that magic is just one template but magic is what we call it. Your subconscious mind knows all. So whatever template works in order for you to get in touch with it, to empower it, to use it to your advantage, and to remember that you are source is what I advocate. I teach numerology because it is the first language, and everything here in this realm is numerical. For anybody familiar with the matrix, those green letters and numbers that you saw falling from the computer screen, that is gematria. That is numerology. That is your own DNA that they tell you is junk. It is not junk. It shows up as a frequency as much as anything else. But you have to do your own self work in order to understand it. And that is what I attempt to teach.
Wow, brother. That's a lot of dying for a start. Glad you survived. A lot of people were commenting on that as well. And I would imagine this is what builds character. You know, all the hardships that we have in life, what you say is so on point about suffering. You know, it's the suffering that gives us the impetus to transcend who it was that we thought we were in order to grow, to be able to compensate for the suffering and balance. And you mentioned as well what you teach. So now we're getting a sense of where you're coming from and what sort of shaped you and your deep love for your family and the suffering that you've been through. We haven't approached the martial arts yet. That was obviously a big part of what must have shaped you. What about the learning and the learning of your craft, of your numbers, and what you teach? I'd love to get an insight into your KunamiKodes. What inspired you to start this mystery school? And was it something that you knew you were going to do when you started it, or did it just sort of come together piece by piece like a puzzle?
You have this perfect way of asking questions. I absolutely love that. Okay. Well, my grandfather was a numerologist, but he didn't talk about it. It was just kind of like this thing between us, almost like playing chess. And puzzles were always big. So I knew numerology, but I didn't know gematria. I didn't know this idea of coding letters and numbers, what um, I like to call alphanumerics. Um, it first made itself known to me when my mother bought me a book called the Bible Code. The Bible Code talks about a hidden code within the Torah, right, within the Tanakh. Um, the issue people had with it trying to debunk it was they tried to apply it to any book. They actually told on themselves because that's essentially what gematria is. When you understand that every so-called secret society, whether it be the Freemasons, whether it be Scottish Rite, York Rite, whether it be the Rosicrucians, whether it be the Order of Jesters or Knights of the Golden Circle, they all have their own code. They all have their own cipher. They all have their own language. And of course, it's based off of the oldest that we can come across, which would be Sumerian, some say Phoenician, Chaldean, Latin, English. All of these are ciphers up to now the point of Fibonacci and squares and reverse Satanism and Francis Bacon, who was a MI5 and MI6. He worked for the Queen, right? All of these code breakers. This has been going on for a very, very long time. So I study as much as I can possibly get my hands on when it comes to numerology. There is no right or wrong. If you look at the Chaldean system, for example, the Chaldean system goes up to the number 8. There is no 9. Now, 9 existed, but it was held in such a reverence, they didn't really use it, right? So you have to understand why that is. You have to understand why that would change. We have this idea of master numbers now, right? 11, 22, and 33. Well, how long has that been? That wasn't always so. When the idea of master numbers first hit, it was only 11 and 22 and not 33. 33 equals death. 33 equals the number of vertebrae in your spine. 33 equals the height of knowledge that can exist in this realm. That's why when you get there, it's death. What does it look like? It looks like properly activating the crown chakra, right? You can see this in Fight Club. At the end, when in order to reassert control, the protagonist, who has no name, has to kill Tyler Durden by putting a gun in his own head. That they're symbolically showing you this. So diving into your own numerology, your own birthday, your own code will show you, at the very least, why you reflect in the way that you do. Understanding subconsciously what your frequency is, understanding other words and other numbers that essentially come to the same frequency as your first name, your middle name if you have one, your last name, your company name, your combined name. All of these hold power, all of these hold resonance, and you can't choose a nickname that is not you, that is not empowered by you. See, it fits like a shoe because it properly energetically describes you. All of this is able to be seen numerically.
Well, that is really beautiful. I love the way you put that. And something that you said also triggered me to remember a wonderful question that was presented by Aaron. And if I can find it, I'll put it on the screen for us. And I think it's quite a good question, since you've had a number of brushes with the other side, as well as obviously, it all happened at once for you, didn't it? You lost one loved one, another loved one, another loved one, and before you knew it, you were like overwhelmed by death. And then you had to experience it all for yourself. So what do you think about the free will, life, and death, and how we're programmed into the concept of life and death being voluntary? Well, what are your thoughts with regards to life and death? Do you think we choose our incarnations? Do you think it is chosen for us? Do you think it is a consequence of mathematics, perfect mathematics of where we've come from? So the show must go on, the equation must go to the next set of numbers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
We most definitely completely choose and author our lives. We plan out every single detail. And I would ask the question, if we don't, then who did? Numerology and astrology just show you the pathways that we use to incarnate, what led to it. For example, if you have karmic debt, right, that means your previous life has impacted your current life, right? Because you couldn't have it otherwise. If you do not have karmic debt, that means your previous lives have not impacted your current life to the point of you are here to expand. No restriction. You don't have to work off anything. But also you have to understand that karma is a law that we choose to adhere to. Does it exist? Yes. Is it a law that can be broken? Yes. Why do you think we have speed limits set up that we break everywhere? This is actually a reminder of that. There's nothing wrong with going along with the law. Sometimes the law will let you go if you're speeding and you have a pregnant woman. Typically, the officer will not only let you go, but he'll drive in front and allow you to speed. So what is this? What is this displaying? It's showing you proper intention. See, it's not going to look how you think it is, because we are all an answer to a question. Your entire life is the answer to a question you asked yourself before you incarnate. So as opposed to getting right to the end of it, well, nobody wants to be 5 years old, graduating kindergarten, and then dying. It doesn't make any sense. You didn't have the time to learn anything. You didn't have the time to realize anything. This is why we know that time doesn't actually exist. Time is actually the beast, 666, right? Because time, the beast, is always eating. But time has to exist in order for you to have these kind of self realizations. In the spiritual world, you already know everything. Think about that. Everything that there is to know. You ever notice when you dream, you have less questions? Because your dreams are trying to answer the question you already asked. You forgot you asked it. So, yes, we definitely author our own lives. When you just take a moment and look, you see it couldn't have been any other way. I had a wonderful reading yesterday where someone I was able to try to help somebody understand that you authored your entire life. So when we have these moments, these patches in life where we think that everything's out to get us, we can't do anything right, nothing's working, we should be here, we going to, that's you. That's you trying to get your own attention. Nobody's out there. There's no Illuminati is that great. No Jesuit conspiracy could even come close. We're tormented the most by our own hands, by our own mind. We are out to get us at all times. If you understand your subconscious and you understand again the idea of simulation, now you understand the importance of understanding your own code. If you've got a phone, the greatest iPhone in the world, you're not doing anything without a charge. You're not doing anything without a signal. You need a phone number to call somebody. Well, how do you call yourself? You need to know your own numbers.
That's a beautiful analogy. Really beautiful analogy. Because can we call ourselves? Even that, that's a wonderful question you're asking there. I find this conversation is flowing so beautifully. I almost don't want to detract you from anything. Though, what is coming to me at this moment, as I'm listening to your beautiful sharing, is you mentioned this. You used such beautiful words, Jesuit conspiracy. And I'd love to take a look at, is this the reason why you feel so inspired to teach the KunamiKodes? And I'd love to hear more about the KunamiKodes school, when it started, what courses you're offering as well. And yeah, I mean, I'll leave it an open-ended question, but the Jesuit conspiracy, is that somehow behind you feeling the need to become a decoder and to teach?
Well, that would be giving the Jesuits far, far, far too much credit. And I do not ever want to give them that kind of acknowledgement, because anything they are is because of what they have. I don't even want to say that they stole it. We definitely know that a lot of information has been stolen, but you can't own an idea. You know, I call what I teach KunamiKodes because it is an amalgamation of many different forms of numerology. As opposed to taking up one sword from the table, I want to take all of them up and cut the whole forest down, right? You don't want to be locked into a system. You don't want to be locked into a tradition. You don't want to be locked into a thought. You want to be able to think beyond it. So if you use all the tools at once, I think that that's able to do. I came across Telegram late 2020. I think I have to actually look at the start tag, because it does tell you. I came across Telegram and I was in love, because Telegram is essentially what WhatsApp tried to be. WhatsApp, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, please. WhatsApp, you can send up to 100 megabytes, right? 100 megabyte file, which is wonderful, because when it comes to email, most email allows you to send 25 megabytes, maybe 50 if you're paying for one of these fancy services, which is nothing. Facebook, which used to be wonderful when it came to book collection and PDFs, has these groups where you can upload PDFs up to 25 megabytes, no bigger. Telegram, for free, allows you to upload files 2 gigabytes. If you pay for the premium, you can upload 4 gigabytes. That was heaven for me. So I created a digital library. Libraries are one of my favorite places in the world. I've learned and realized some incredible things. Like they've truly been my churches. So when I started digging online 20 years ago, maybe even more, I noticed that a lot of occult and metaphysical books were available free online. Now, people didn't go around telling you this or talking about it. You just kind of had to know, right? So I began making a digital library. I've had very what I call very good followings on social media. So a lot of people have followed me, but I primarily used it essentially for my readees and my students, the people who wanted to have a place where they could learn resources. It is in the Telegram. If there's a question on numerology, if I can't answer it, I can probably point you somewhere that can. I'm not a know-it-all. I retain information very well, and I understand a little bit about a lot. But I wanted a place where we could congregate, and it turned into something I was not at all prepared for. When I started to speak, when I started to teach, and I started to offer readings, I've gotten a joy of a lifetime. To be able to help someone tap in with their own self, tap in with their own shadow. Your shadow is your power. I like using the analogy of Peter Pan. If you understand that Peter Pan was trapped in the astral world, Peter Pan was dead, right? He came to Wendy, and I want you to look, and you can look at almost any depiction from Disney to modern. You'll see that the house Wendy lives in, they're always at the top. There's always 3 or 4 stories. It's a tall house, right? He came to a point of feminine energy, and his shadow detached, right? He could not reattach it. Wendy, because this is the way love works, and this is the divine feminine. You have always been loved, you are love, and you will always be love. She needed him to remember this, so she was easily able to reattach his shadow. What did she grab? She grabbed the shadow's foot. On the bottom of your foot is your soul, right? Do you understand why they call it that? She sewed his shadow back together. In return, he gave her fairy dust and allowed her to raise in consciousness and be able to fly. They went to Sirius, second star on the left, straight on till morning, right? Captain Hook represents Saturn. He's actually the good guy. He's the beast. He's actually works in two parts. That's why you see him coming with the hook, the ring of Saturn, but he's being chased by Apep. He's being chased by the crocodile who's ticking. They're telling you exactly the symbolism what this is. So the idea of reconnecting with your shadow is giving you all the treasures of darkness. It's giving you all your own information back. It's showing you why you are who you are. There's nothing more powerful than that in this realm, because that is the most ultimate form of self-love I believe we can express.
Well, that's really beautiful as a sentiment and as an idea. And damn, I mean, they're really trying to get rid of things. The woke agenda. I'd love for you to say a few words on the woke agenda as well. I mean, especially since we're living in this woke connoisseur, if you will.
Well, that's going to be a whole mouthful. When it comes to the powers that shouldn't be, which I've grown accustomed to calling them, and I'm even questioning that name. It's everything boils down to perspective. When you look at the idea of an Illuminati or a secret society or these rogue governments, it's always been one world government. It's nothing new. That's always been the case. If you want to understand government, look at wrestling. Look at world WWE. We used to call it WWF when I was growing up. You'll see all these different nationalities, all these different creeds, all these different cultures, but they're all coming to a squared circle, right? They're all doing the same thing on the same mat. All the deals are already struck. The Magna Carta turned into the Declaration of Independence, right? Like we're talking about the exact same lineages here. All the world profited from the same foul things. There is no separation. When you look into the idea that we are separate by culture or by race or by religion, you see the hand being played, but you have to pay attention to it. When we talk about things being a distraction, any and everything can be a distraction. Distraction isn't the issue. If you are tapped in with yourself and if you understand who you are, where you've come from, this world can't touch you. There's nothing to be in it and not be, or to be of it and not be in it per se. But the conspiracies, they don't end. There are so many places to get lost. You see the need for consciousness, but you have to understand how consciousness naturally evolves through the lens of human emotion, because consciousness doesn't have emotion. So, when we talk about being woke, I don't put too much stock in that word. I understand why they've demonized it, but woke is just another form of saying consciousness or awake, right? Now, if somebody walks up to me and say, "Hey, I heard some of what you were talking about. It sounded so conscious, sounded so woke." I won't correct them per se, right? But if someone was to tell me that they're woke or they're conscious to try to get some kind of, I don't know, acknowledgement, you have to understand what it is you're actually saying. You can be conscious, you can be woke laying in your bed and looking at the ceiling. What are you doing? Right? Are you doing something? Did you read something and have an acknowledgement? Did you go in? You have to do something with it. You can't just be woke. You can't just be a Christian. Christian is about doing work. Being an advocate is about advocating. Being a speaker is about speaking. You have to do it. And that's a concept I think we've gotten largely away from, because you see things like AI coming about, which is making things easier. AI is like marijuana for so-called African Americans, right? It doesn't do much. It lulls you to sleep. If you utilize it, it can, but that's not that's not why New York, Chicago, I just read this article, New York, Chicago, and I think Miami, um, go through the most weed in this country. That's not for manifestation. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not judging anybody, but we have to point these things out. If you utilize something for what it's intended for, you get a much higher result. If you fly higher, you get a much easier ride as opposed to flying lower with the turbulence. Right? So we have to understand that this works across every medium of information, every medium of frequency, every medium of energy. You have to go high. It's like having a higher self and a lower self. You know, the higher self is trying to pull you to your apex. The lower self is trying to keep you here.
I like that. So you've managed to actually touch on a couple of really interesting points there, because you've now started to branch into the spiritual philosophies of, the different aspects of the proverbial self, which is something I'd love you to expand upon. Though, just before we move on from this, and I think it's quite relevant, there was Mexico was asking a question about the martial arts training. And I'd love to get your opinion. For me, martial arts is something that's like I think all children should do. Maybe that's just because I'm a South African. It's a necessary skill set to walk down the street with in this country. But it's the same in New York, isn't it? I'm sure a lot of places in the States is, pretty hard nut places. So a bit of martial arts is the practical solution to staying alive and safe and not mugged. But from the spiritual perspective, what did martial arts give to you? And what I mean, I can imagine what drove you to martial arts, because you told us you lived in a very serious neighborhood, so it would have been a survival skill, I'm guessing. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what did it bring to you? What did you get from martial arts?
Martial arts gave me a lot. It gave me discipline. My mother put me in martial arts when I was 4. And fighting used to be, I remember it being the scariest thing in the world. And then I remember when I finally got hit in the face, and I almost liked it. I almost liked it because there was an activation, there was a reason for anger, there was a reason to explode. But then that shines a light on a deeper aspect of yourself to understand why that need is there, right? So it was a beautiful way to release energy, to move energy, and to defend people. When I really, really, truly got into martial arts was I had a friend who was, to say it nicely, extremely nerdy, not very physical. And there was a bully who used to pick on him, and he wouldn't do a thing, and it got to the point where I was ashamed because I would walk away, like I think I'm thinking 5 or 6, something like that, 5 or 6 years old. I would walk away, and then one day I walked away and I looked back, and like he was punching him, but like he was looking at me, and I whooped that bully's ass. I got suspended. I got in all kinds of, school trouble. But my mom, I remember that was the one time my grandfather gave me a spanking. My mom put on a whole show. She went along with it, and this and that. And when we finally got to her room, she made me a special dinner, and she was proud. You know what I mean? But that showed me, um, that began to show me the gift of perspective, because when you operate in a system, you expect it to be a certain way. You expect everybody to move a certain kind of way. And to a certain extent, everybody is looked upon to do exactly that. So when you go against that, to have that reflected in my mother meant the world. So she pushed that forward by keeping me in classes to the point of sending me to Japan. I lived in Osaka for close to 3 years, and that showed me how to begin to face your fear. On top of the fact that I got my ass kicked for like the first year and a half, and I learned what faith was. I learned what actual faith was enacted. When I got my black belt, when I first got to the school, my sensei asked me what I was afraid of. I told him spiders and thunderstorms. He didn't say anything. He didn't mention a word. He just okay. Didn't write it down. There were no notepads. And almost 3 years later, he told me to walk with him, and we walked around a mountain range. Small. It wasn't anything grand. But there was a storm coming, and he told me to defend myself and to hit him if I could. When I woke up, my arm was almost broken. I was bloodied and bruised, but I had a black belt around my waist. So apparently I did what I was supposed to do, but I don't really remember. That turned into being security and bouncing in strip clubs and in stadiums and in sports arenas. Um, I was good. I was big. I was intimidating. Um, that goes a long way, especially when it comes to bodyguarding or like protecting women. Um, it's very easy to get lost in that because when you can offer that kind of protection, everybody comes to you. Everybody needs you to go somewhere and to go into seedy places, and that brought me into a lot of realms of knowledge at a very early age I wasn't expecting. And it was the discipline of martial arts that allowed me to exist there because I was far too young doing entirely too many wild things. Shout out to my brother Zerilli. And rest in power to my brother Black and Kush. Um, we did entirely too much, but it was due to stature, it was due to size. And this is what appearance can give you, but appearance is not the truth. So that took me further. When I moved away from Detroit, I began to volunteer and teach children in my neighborhood. And that was actually how I reconnected with some of my family in Pennsylvania. Um, so it's been a beautiful journey. I recommend it for all children, girls, boys alike, and definitely women. Women, if I can give you anything, when I was something I've given women for years, remember how strong your hand can actually be and how fast. If you can chop someone in the throat, they have to breathe, no matter what size they are, no matter how hard you work out, they will keel over, grabbing their throat, trying to breathe, and you can either take that time to run or elbow them or knee them in the head. Remember that, because there's a lot of crazy things going on in the world. you know, if I can give you one thing, one physical tidbit.
Yeah, well, I can see that's obviously a big part of you, the definition of discipline. And I always thought your Saturn was particularly well aspected. I get the feeling. So it must be a connection there with the Saturn and the martial arts, and that your training was, inspired from a young age, which is noble. Now, where I'd want to go with this now, I think we've broken into the second hour already. Yes, we have. We've broken into the second hour a little while ago. I thought to ask you about your work, if I may. Tell us about your wonderful readings that you do for people. You do these grimoires. You did one for me. When did you start doing your grimoires? And tell us a little bit about it, if if you might.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Um, I started using numerology to read people back in 2010. In 2010, I was in prison. I mentioned before I was in the street. So I used to hustle. One of the things I used to sell was cocaine. Um, I did that for a lot of my earlier conscious years. Um, when I got caught, I went to prison I got a 3 to 6. I did 9 months in my county, and I went upstate in Pennsylvania, Camp Hill. Um, I was reading in the yard one day. I was reading a book by Malachi Z. York, um, who is a world-renowned author, even though when you look him up, the first thing you will see is that he was a supposed child molester. That is a whole nother story. I have nothing to do with that. I'm not defending him. I'm just telling you what I was reading and what led to the incident. There was an elder walking around the yard, and when he saw me reading the book, he blatantly took notice. After making 3 rounds, he came up to me and asked me what I knew about the author. I told him at the time not much. And he began to explain certain things with me. He used to be a member of one of his organizations. And over time, we began to play chess. Um, he asked me my name when he realized he had only been calling me Detroit. And when I told him my name, he had to ask me to spell it. When I spelled it for him, for anybody who's familiar with like psychics or mediums, you'll see that they do a certain thing with their eyes sometimes when they tap in. His eyes did this kind of mental Rolodex kind of thing, but I knew he wasn't a psychic because I knew psychics. My mother was a psychic, right? He didn't go to the same place. He began to tell me, and this is just my first name, just Kilele. He began to tell me things about me that nobody knew. He told me what color my car was. He told me how I was with women. He told me how I like to fight. He told me things that nobody knew. And I was blown away. And I said, "What did you just do? How did you possibly do that? Like you know something." And I saw what your eyes did. Like you're not remembering, but you are. And he began to teach me gematria. Um, Over the next 6 months, he taught me everything he knew. And he taught me in large because he saw something in my name that told him I would be able to take it further than he did. I came to find out exactly what that was. If anybody is familiar with Nikola Tesla, whether he did exist or he did not exist, because there's a lot of evidence on both sides, it's not my concern. Um, he spoke about understanding the power, the manifestational power of 3, 6, and 9. My birthday is 12/24/1980. If you break that down, that's 3, 6, and 9. If you do Kilele in the Sumerian cipher, it is 396. And these instances continue throughout my name, throughout my birth, throughout my city, and it doesn't stop. Um, I turned that into a reading where I take your name, I take your birthday, I take any name that you have, whether it be a company, whether it be a pet, whether it be a secret, whether it be a nickname, a name you don't like, and I show you your reflection in it. And hopefully, I try to tap into your shadow and show you why you chose it. When you look at people from life path 1 to 5, that tends to be younger souls, right? Now, that doesn't mean like you're brand new and you haven't done this millions of times. It just means that you're still on a journey of expansion. You're still on a journey of exploration. Um, Here is where you need to be. When we get to 6, when we get to 7, these are the older souls. When we get to 8, when we get to 9, these are the oldest souls. And these are the ones who begin to stay here as staples. These are the ones who choose to go back to source and tend to come back to help or to guide or to be a standing tenant to an idea, which is really all we are. It's just about reflecting and showing you your own light and trying to help you reconnect with your own methods of producing it.
Wow, what a revelation, eh? So you really made a couple of mistakes, but you made the best out of a really bad situation. I suppose that's what martial arts must have taught you, how to adapt, how to make the best of a bad situation. It's essentially what it is, I think, if you were to define martial arts, the training of it, the discipline, because it's a bad situation when someone attacks you. But you can make it better, less troubling for oneself. So there's a clear application there. Inspiring how, of all places, prison was where you became inspired to learn about the nature of the soul and the revelation of the self through the powers of numbers. And your grimoire readings, um, you do use various different types of numerology, and you've mentioned that before. I'd love us to tap into that because obviously there's different number ciphers, and you mentioned the Chaldean, which is obviously, you know, probably one of the oldest. Although I think the Paleo Hebrew and the Chaldean, interesting. I think what we're calling Chaldean might have been a development of it, because I'm sure the Paleo Hebrew must have been where it really started. But regardless, um, I'd love to hear about the different ciphers that you use when you do your grimoires, and I love the way you present it. Um, what would you say about the different types of ciphers in terms of numerology? And how would you use the different types of ciphers? And when would you use a Chaldean versus a whichever other cipher you're using?
Well, that is a very, very good question. When it comes to understanding ciphers, so case in point, simple cipher, or the simplest or ordinal would be the alphabetic order with numerology, which would be A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, up to Z, which is 26, right? My personal favorite, Sumerian, which I contend to be the oldest. Not that that necessarily matters to a great degree, but it gives me the greatest resonance and the greatest array of words, terms, and phrases. Um, Sumerian starts with the cipher of 6. So A is 6, B is 12, C is 18, up to Z, which is 156, right? Now, different ciphers all have their own key. They all have their own legend. So understanding when and where they were used in history will also give you a big idea of where to use them. Um, but it's going to be based on what you're decoding. If you are decoding yourself, I say to use them all. If you are looking into orphan trains from the um, the world's fairs between the 1800s and 1900s, right? Then you may want to use Sir Francis Bacon. You may want to use reverse satanic because that's going to be more in league with that narrative, especially when you come across certain terms like putting yourself up by your bootstraps. Numerically, that means something. So that taps into a certain dimension. How can we view dimensions. How can we make that easier and make it make sense? A dimension would be like the 70s, right? So if you were going to the 70s, it's going to be about bell bottoms and afros and disco, right? That's a dimension. If you go to the 80s, it's about gold, gold ropes and Adidas and Kangos, and that's a whole dimension. So numerically, when it comes to different schools of thought, you can see when they emerged and how they were used. That's going to largely determine where you would use it. If it comes to modern day news stories, you can probably use the 4 base ciphers, right? But that's going to keep you at base level. Again, it's going to depend on what it is you're trying to see, because every cipher will show you a different aspect. In much the same way, every station of the zodiac will show you a different perspective. It's much the same way. They're really mirrors of each other when it comes to numerology and astrology. It's just one is essentially physically being acted out as opposed to just being the frequency.
Beautiful. Beautifully put there. I love the way you describe it with the dimensions. Really gives a sense of visceral perspective and understanding that people can draw. And the Sumerian cipher it's a fascinating kettle of fish in itself. So you work with your ciphers. What else does the KunamiKodes Mystery School have on offer at the moment, and what other plans? Where do you see it going in the future?
I'll be completely honest with you. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly comfortable where I am currently. What I mean by that is I am elated. I am incredibly thankful, and I am blown away at the readings that I give. Um, but when it comes to how I came to knowledge and the current state of affairs of the world when it comes to knowledge, I'm very particular about how I move. I do not do what I do for money. I charge $63, which equals out to 9 for completion for my grimoires, and I'm not raising that price. Um, People tell me maybe I could, maybe I should, all the time. That's not why I do this. I think money should be a side effect of following your higher purpose. So I've been reluctant when it comes to the idea of teaching a class. Um, but more people are asking for a class. So I'm considering that for the new year. Um, I love the idea of a grimoire because it teaches you how to get in touch with yourself. And if you can get in touch with yourself, you can get in touch with any person, place, or thing. However, application of that afterwards, because I've got a handful of students, a handful of readees who have truly taken what I've given them and run with it and shown me some things. For most people, it's incredibly difficult. And I completely understand that because collectively we have been taught to hate math. I want you to think about this. Nobody wants to be a zero, but everybody wants more zeros in their bank account, right? But you hate math. If you tap into numerology, you tap into yourself a little bit, you might be surprised at how much you actually enjoy and understand math, because that's just an idea that has been perpetuated. And I see that more and more. So I'm thinking about teaching. I'm thinking about uh, um, offering some sort of course. I'm very hesitant because I, being the curious person that I am, have tapped in with a lot of people, and I've gotten readings from a lot of people just to see, what the how on it you actually are. And there's a lot of great people out there, There's a lot of people doing some incredible science and truly helping people. But there's a lot of people who are getting over. There's a lot of people who are overcharging. There's a lot of people who are ripping people off. And I can't fucking stand it. I don't want to be associated with it. I don't want to be put in the same category or conversation. It disgusts me because you're adding to your own detriment. And whether they know it or realize it or not is not my concern, but that's what's happening. So I keep my prices low. I don't show up places for money. I don't, you ask me, I'll be there. You know, I'm very much that way. So I'm trying to find the compromise. I'm trying to find the way where I can teach without having to shade or make anyone feel any kind of way or question, at the very least, what I'm giving you. That will never be the case.
Well, that's beautiful that you're sharing your heart and your feelings so openly with us. Thank you for that. What else is on my mind as I'm hearing you speaking? And it's been sort of hatching in the back of my mind. You mentioned this encyclopedia set you got when you were 5. And you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned the orphan trains. I'd love to hear about your idea of history, because you've obviously spent a lot of time decoding things. So what is your take on history? How accurate is it? What should we take from it? And where would you suggest people to start looking for the truth and how to decode it most efficiently?
History has always been my favorite subject. Before I got my felony, my plan was I was actually going to college to be a teacher. I wanted to be a history teacher. I'm very thankful for that hiccup that I gave myself, that I did not go that route, because what you are forced to teach due to the education system and due to the governments of the world is horrible. But there's a reason for that. History has always been my favorite subject because you have to study everything. You have to study language. You have to study food. You have to study the actual culture itself. I love the idea I got from the Bible at a very early age, but to even point that out got me in trouble, right? So when you look at the idea of knowing one book means that you know none, because you only know the one. You have to understand what that really means. When you look at the idea of religion, if you don't understand the custom that goes along with it, then what do you truly understand? If I want to be a blood, I can't be out here crip walking. It doesn't work that way, right? I'm going to get into trouble. So you have to understand the entirety of a thing, or at least close to it. So I love the idea of being able to connect with someone based on what it is that they actually know. If you can do that symbolically, it's a lot easier to convey a thing. So, did I answer your question?
Well, you did. You went into the philosophical side of it most definitely, and beautifully so. I was also hoping to find out a little bit more about tapping into the history. I mean, these orphan trains are awfully excitingly interesting, because there's so much history with regards to this. You also mentioned earlier the World Fair, and obviously American history being probably, I don't know, is it the most doctored history there is in the world? Because I've come across a lot of American information that just makes me think like, wow, did they sell us a crock of something or what? And just exactly where was Tutankhamun found? Just how deep does that rabbit hole go? And since we've got you here, I'd love to hear a little bit of your takes on history, because I think Like you sent me some amazing research on the Second World War that really changed my perspective on Hitler. Because I thought I had a clear idea, or a more clear idea, and looking at some of this other research actually made me question everything I thought I knew. And I love questioning what I think I know, because it really gives me some perspective. The moment we think we know something is when we're falling off the bus.
Very true. Very true. Thank you for that. I got to give a shout out to David Ewing Jr. He wrote an incredible book on Hitler that you can find in the Telegram for free. History is laid out and taught in such a way truly to keep you under control, but in a sense to draw you to it and to kind of draw out your curiosity. Because if you look at what is taught, why it's taught, how it's implemented, the idea of wars, the idea of civics, you can begin to see a narrative, especially when you correlate religion. They teach you that there is a separation of church and state. There is not. When you look into the narratives, the eras and dimensions speak, or should I say, energy speaks in the term of what you would call a dimension, or what you would call an era, or what you would call a decade, on top of so many other more ways. But when it comes to history, they've had to lie. They have to lie, and they have to continue to lie, because if you know the truth, then we're talking about all-out mutiny. The idea of conspiracy has gotten to such a fever pitch, people don't know what to do with the information. And the only thing where that kind of makes sense is to reflect it or push it outward, right? This is why social media actually came back. Social media was going to be dead until conscious woke people got a hold of it, right? Until some of these alphabet people got a hold of it and started pushing it and turning it into a company, turning it into a profit. Shout out to Ronan, profiting from profiting. You know what I mean? Like that's essentially what we're dealing with. So if you focus on what they show you, when they show you, and why, you have a much better idea as to the whys of that. They don't make movies to entice you. They don't make movies to just invoke a certain emotion. They make movies to create a certain reaction within the populace, right? Because life imitates art and art imitates life. It's a constant rotation. But the mirroring effect, you have to remember that the TV and the movie gets into you. You don't get into the TV and the movie. It programs you. You don't program it. This is why decoding is so important, because anything that doesn't get caught by your consciousness is Haru. Your consciousness is the hero. Your consciousness is the Messiah. Your consciousness is the prison guard, is the cop, is the judge, is the angry wife, right? You call it whatever template works for you. But if it gets past your consciousness, it is automatic programming. So think about how many songs you sing you hate. You know what I mean? You'd be in the car, or maybe listen to the radio, for those who listen to the radio, or maybe at your job and somebody's playing the radio, or when you shop and you hear a song that you can't stand and you sing it. Why? Because it's automatically programmed in your head. You already know it. You only have to hear something one time. You only have to see something one time to know it. Your access to it is going to be based upon your attachment to conscious light. That's what we're working on here, because in order to get to the light, you got to go to the darkness.
And seamlessly, you've taken us to the next question. Because you're talking here about spells, by the sounds of what I'm hearing, magic. So I'd love to hear your take on spells and magic. And do you practice spells and magic? And what do you think of the way in which spells and magic are being used, and what would you suggest to people to protect themselves from these, whether they're musical or whatever spells are being leveled at them? And a few words about those leveling the spells, if you don't mind.
I love magic. I practice magic. I believe and know in magic, and I understand that it is at its core the power of your subconscious mind. There is nothing that is going to override or overshadow that. The subconscious mind is source, literally. So if you understand that there is no greater spell than the one you write, then you already got magic figured out. You can take any spell and you can recite it and it will work for you, because you can't have a cause without an effect. You cannot. It must work. Whether or not your eyes will see the reflection of how it works, or whether it works in the way that you would exactly want it to, you're going to have to keep practicing, because you got to understand you live in a matrix. So when it comes to magic, you'll notice a lot of people will, try something and it works, and then they'll try it again, the same spell, and it won't work. Well, you need to keep changing the spell to be truthful about it, because why would it manifest the exact same thing? There are no two people, even twins and triplets and quadruplets. There's something different about them, aside from the order that they came out, because the first one out is always the alpha. The first one out is always the most aggressive. That's a code, that's a signature, that's a language that we follow, and it shows up in everything that we do.
Beautifully put, brother. Beautifully put. And we have Polymathing, who you know has been on our show. And his question is, I think, a rather fascinating question. Which melanated brothers and sisters have inspired you, left their mark, and helped to define your journey, and were leaders that you looked up to?
That is a wonderful question. Thank you so much, Polly. Love, peace, and power to everybody in the chat. I'm sorry I haven't been paying too much attention. I've just been kind of going with it. That's a long list. George G.M. James, author of Stolen Legacy. John Henrik Clarke, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakanan, Dr. Phil Valentine, Bobby Hemmett, Brother Panic. I saw someone mentioned 432 Con Drop. Dr. Malachi Z. York, Michael Bell, Dr. Jewel Pookrum, Miss Blue. There are entire Malcolm X. I mean, you can name them. You know, I'm speaking to the more occult, metaphysical, and historic. But you can name them. You know, it doesn't matter. Something I've worked incredibly hard my entire life to do is to be able to separate the message from the messenger. That can be a very, very difficult task. But when you understand the grand scheme, when you understand that you are the one who stands over everything, then you have to understand that all these hints, all these clues were left by you. If you would like a visual of what I'm talking about, just watch the movie Tenet. If you haven't seen it, forgive me for the spoiler, but he slowly realizes over time that he created this entire establishment. He was the one who set everything in motion. He was the one who sent himself back. So when you understand the purpose of reincarnation, when you understand the purpose of refinement, you see again that all these little spiritual landmarks that you laid out. So the emotion that's triggered by you understanding this or realizing this or being aware of this is the work, no matter what it is. Because every emotion has an opposite, and every emotion has a reason, it has a cause, it has a root. And that's ultimately what we're getting back to. These teachers reflect that. People who give you scholarship, people who give you where they got it from. I built a digital library because I didn't just wake up one day and to know these things. No, I researched and then I suffered to be able to correspond to the research and make it make sense. That's what we all do. It's not that I've suffered more than you or anyone else. I just understood. And you gotta understand also, I am a 9 life path. 9 life path means adaptability. It also means those who continuously play the game. So I reflect that through what I've learned, but I reflect it through what I teach at the same time, because I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for my teachers. My teachers have been incredible. I still have them. Anyone in the Telegram, you can see that every day. I flood you with information, and it is not mine.
Beautiful, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You obviously done a bit of reading. You do love libraries. What I'd like to move towards is another part of what I would call the Dr. K flavor or masala, is that you decode. You've done a lot of decoding for the media, decoding for various different comic books, and you've drawn a lot of parallels between the occult therapeutics, the occult notions, and occult cosmology, and the comic books, especially some of the which have become like really big budget Hollywood productions and such these days. And I'd love for you to speak a few words about the media decodes that you've been doing and how important that is, because I think it's something you've obviously spent a lot of time on and have given some invaluable wisdom with this regard.
The media gives certain narratives every day, purposely. And many of them are encoded. Many of them are blatant. Many of them are obvious, but it's the subtlety that gets me. It's the way they mock, the way they tell you that all of this is a reflection of you. And it's on a level that is beyond human. It's beyond conspiracy. No one could correlate. When you truly begin to look at what we call conspiracy, when you look at what, like, for example, people look at war. You look at World War I, World War II. In the midst of that, you had the financial system collapse, right? And people will tell you war was about disagreements. It was about culture. It was about policy. It was about none of that. It was about destroying architecture. What do you mean, destroying architecture? What does that have to do with anything? Well, if you understood what existed in the realm, that wouldn't be so difficult of a question or so perplexing. But we have energy centers that don't make sense. We have buildings and structures that don't make any sense on top of what we know was destroyed. When you look at one of my favorite topics is the World's Fair. The World's Fair fits under the umbrella of what we call Tartaria, which has become a very popular catchphrase in the last few years, right? There's a lot of things you can grab from that. The idea of like we already mentioned, American classic literature, from Anne of Green Gables to Oliver Twist to Huckleberry Finn to Tom Sawyer, Little House on the Prairie. All these stories deal with orphans, right? Why is that? Who are we trying to program? Who are we trying to convince? Why was the orphan train phenomenon going on not only in America, but all over the world? It was going on in Australia. It was going on in Africa, on every continent. Now you got to ask yourself a question, because telegrams and phones, this wasn't normal. How could you even communicate where something was going? Oh, well, we understand that we have this tunnel system that also goes all over the world, right? This brings about trees and ancient tree stumps, because a lot of the entryways to these tunnels are through them, whether it be Mount Kilimanjaro or Mount Fuji or the Devil's Tower, right? We're not supposed to know that, even though they show it to you consistently in your films. They show it to you in your cartoons. They tell you in movies. Don't get me started on the Beatles, right? Like, they're speaking in code. There's this consistent mockery of symbology. So the more in tune you actually are with yourself, the more symbolic literate you are, the easier it is to recognize yourself, because you are all there is. So again, what is the actual conspiracy? Are we trying to be under control of some powers that be, which is ultimately the subconscious? We can rule it out to be the governments in this group and that group. But could it also be your own shadow? Could it be your own subconscious? I mentioned a couple of days ago why Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen series has the circumpunk on his forehead. He said it was the only symbol he respects. Understand the gravity of what he's actually saying. When you come to the center, because that's also a compass, right? When you come past the center, you realign, and you see that everything is one, and now you're able to expand. Again, we're back to this idea of karmic debt. So what is decoding? Decoding is moving through your own shadow to get your own light. And you see that all of this is an illusion. Now, that's going to take us somewhere deeper, because, like I mentioned before, with the levels of frequency, like the 1 to 5 to 6 to 7, you may need to be here a little bit longer. Maybe you want to learn how to dance in your next life. Maybe you want to have that family you never had. Maybe you want to correct this, that, or the third. Maybe you want to relive this grand, joyous victory. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But good or bad, that attachment is what brings you back. When you see past the attachment, when you understand the tenets of Egypt, of Ma'at, I have not done this, I have not done that, because you were never here. If you argue that, well, of course, then it was real and you were here and you come back. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a soul trap. Everything exists within the realm of the mother. If the astral and the spiritual realm is all feminine, and this is a reflection of that, but it's inverted, so it is a man's world, then it is still us within the mother. It is still us within the waters of noon. This is why we say everything is actually love. This brings us back to the actual tenet perspective. If you're stuck in a thought, you're stuck in a feeling, you're stuck in a dimension, you're not seeing the whole picture. That's very ugly. That's why the more symmetrical a thing is, the more beauty it holds. Now, look into the windows of your life, and what do you see? These are the sequences you see in near-death experiences. So when you have many, this is where you get phenomenon like bungee jumping, or living on an extreme, living on an edge, because you see that sequence change. you see the meaning, you see the core essence of things change. It's like cooking a roux. You keep reducing until you get down to that essence.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, and it's definitely going to give us more to think about. You've mentioned quite a bit about Marvel, so it's obviously something you've put a bit of thought into, and it's very fascinating the way Marvel has become a, well, let's just say it's been pushed, and they've put a lot of money into it, a lot of creativity has gone into it. Interesting how comic books seem to have also shared quite a lot of occult knowledge, even in terms of the cosmological and philosophical side to the occult and magical arts seems to be getting shared through these comic books if one decodes them, which is rather fascinating. Brings us back to what you were talking about originally in terms of the decoding, and KunamiKodes is all about the decoding experience. And I thought maybe it seems like we're getting into our last 10 minutes here, and I've kept you talking for almost 2 hours. But I'd love to give you an opportunity to sort of, what is it that we haven't spoken about that's close to your heart? If there's anything that comes to mind, do let me know. And how do you feel about the future? I know that's a bit of a loaded question because obviously there's a lot of inspiration, there's a lot of beauty, but there's also there's a bit of a shit show going on. Let's be honest, But there's also a lot of potential and a lot of possibility and a lot of awakening and a lot of positivity sitting on the back burner. How do you feel about the future? And what else? What other messages would you love to leave people with?
Well, I got to give a special shout out to Ramah because she really just hit it right on the head. What do we marvel at in this world? Where is the focus of true awe? Comic books have been very, very special for me. The first time I left Detroit was because of my uncle, Spencer, rest in power. When I came back from camp after 2 weeks, and I was deathly scared to go to camp, right? To actually go to leave the my neighborhood that had turned into um, a hood, turned into a slum, where death awaited you at every turn. To go into the woods where all you had to worry about was animals, right? I had the time of my life, and when I came back, he gave me a trunk of comic books: Black Panther, Wolverine, Superman, Batman, Teen Titans, Alan Moore, Watchmen, V for Vendetta, um, all kinds of narratives I was still far too young for, but they blew my mind wide open. And I didn't really know what I was looking at. I was looking at mythology because that's truly what comic books are. Comic books give you the most in tune astrology, energy, readings, and predictions you will ever find. That's why Marvel is still here, because what they have essentially stolen in terms of mythology, they have crafted in a way of being able to read it. And movies work and come out in much the same way. Understand the idea of a movie, the idea of a comic, that what they have in common is storyboards. Not only the storyboard, but the idea of, if you understand that movies typically are filmed a year in advance, right? What does that sound like? That sounds like spiritual conception, because everything happens in the astral first and then meticulates, drops down here, right? It's much the same process. And it's a fake scenario on a movie set to get you to elicit a kind of feeling, a kind of resonance. What is different between that and life? That is what I see in the future as far as I go. What I'm writing, my books, will be an amalgamation of all of this, giving you, of course, the numerology and some of the historical aspects, the history, so-called, of numerology, at least how it appears to pop up and why 47, the 47th problem of lucid was what it was, how it got to be 47, what 47 actually represents, the heart and the mind, and so much more. On top of mythology, on top of how things are displayed in the physical, how things are displayed in the narrative, how they're all a reflection of not just your despair, because your despair calls to your deeper hopes, but how it calls to your energy and how it actually works, how it actually functions, because that's all the story is. The journey of the hero is the narrative of energy around the cell. So I like writing things that I haven't read. Um, the only thing I have left at this point is my own book. And I'm very thankful to be working on those now.
Wow, that's beautiful to hear. So you're working on your first book, if I've drawn this correctly, and probably you've got a couple more on the back burners. How far are you on this book, by the way, and when do you imagine, possibly more or less, that it will be available for people to enjoy?
It will be available for people in the Telegram before anyone else or anywhere else. At some point after spring, in published form before the summer. But this is just the first. There's a series coming. There's a fictional series. There's instructional, non-fictional, and autobiographical. There's also, if I can ever shout out Vega Omega, if I can ever get my cousin to sit down, there are a series of comic books also coming. But he has absolutely blown me away. I couldn't be prouder of him. Special shout out to Vega Omega and his family. He has come alive in a way that I can only stand in awe and be thankful. And his pen is a testament to that. So when we actually get the time to do this, it's going to be more than worth it.
I second that, and I third that, and I fourth that. Vega Omega, definitely beautifully gifted brother with a way about his art that's sort of very definitive, very characteristic. It's got its own flavor, shall we say, its own masala mix. Now, I'd love for you to, in closing, as we're getting to, I think we're wrapping up the second hour here. I thought to keep it into 2-hour segments. So your voice must be getting quite tired. I've kept you talking. You've been flowing like a river. What are the closing bits of advice, and what kind of a message would you like to share with people? And your message of hope, because I do, or maybe hope's the wrong word, consolation and inspiration. What would be the last things that you would love to impress upon people, the important life lessons, because you've obviously been through a great journey in life? Would you share it with us, please, brother?
First, I would say that death is not the end. Remove all fear that you may have, because this is not the end all be all, and death is not the end. It's only the beginning. The only question is, how many times do you want to do this? How many times do you need to do this? How many times do you want to do this? That is the ultimate question. If you truly take a look at your life, you will have the answer to that question. That I guarantee you. So, in terms of messages to humanity, I bid you the absolute best when it comes to personal manifestation. When it comes to terms of the gods and the titans, I I will see you again soon because we are eternal and we do not perish from this plane or any other. Where we exist once, we exist always. It is just about perspective. I wish you the insight to pay attention to yourself. I wish you the ability to see you in every form, facet, frequency, and outfit. See you running this place, perform in front of a stage on the multiverse for yourself, and understand what love actually is because it's actually everything. And if you argue that, you have definitely got more work to do. I want to say thank you, Franklin. I absolutely love and adore you. You are a true brother. I could not thank you more for what you have built here for us in the roundtable. And I so look forward to more of these interstellar conversations. I am so honored to have been the first. I want to say love, peace, and power to my brother Ronan. Thank you for building the platform that you have for the Ronan experience. Thank you for being the DeFi king that you are, trying to give us all a little bit more of economic freedom in this matrix and from this matrix. Your work is priceless, and what you do is so thankless. I truly, truly appreciate what it is you do. To Moonfeather, our oracle, I love you. I thank you so much for everything that you put forth and that you bring to our group, that you bring to the world, the children that you have raised and continue to raise, and the energy that you reflect in others, that you teach us to pay attention to our intuition. I thank you for that. And to everyone at the round table, I truly appreciate you and I thank you for paying attention to me for whatever reason. It is an honor and I love all of you. Thank you.
The honor has definitely been mine. Okay, Brother Kalal. And you've dropped some beautiful bombs here, and you are right. The bird dog's going to have his moment in that chair, I hope. I pray. I do want to get bird dog in there. The Ronin. And there's definitely, this is not going to be the last. There's definitely going to be a lot more of these. We can see this. I'd love to get you in the hot chair again at some point to talk about particular topics. Be nice to do a focus on that history. Really get down and start pulling out the tax at some point. And another thing I wanted to ask you, just before we wrap up, is you've obviously had a bit of shadow banning. You know, you mentioned to me a while ago that you've had terrible attacks from various different platforms. So I've told people to find your YouTube channel, and I'm praying that you're going to put some of your content onto the YouTube channel, or more of your content, because I'd love to hear more of you on your YouTube channel. Although you've got good content up there, regardless. Where else could people find you? Are you still operating on Instagram, even though they shut down your account? But maybe this is a good idea to, if you could write it into the main chat here, then I can pop it across the screen as well. And that might be quite your Instagram tag, for example, or any other tags. Where would we find you other than YouTube and Telegram? And yeah.
I will put my links from my link tree in the chat. I live in the shadow. I tell what I know to be and what I believe to be the truth day in and day out. And I've done that for as long as I've existed, long before social media. So when social media came about, of course I did it there. And I have always been in trouble, always been in Facebook jail, um, shadow banned. I live in the shadow. I am Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. You merely adopted the shadow. I was born in it. So that said, I don't seek fame. You know, people who know me will see I rarely promote myself. There are people who hardly even know that I do readings. I'm not here for the fame. I'm not here for that aspect of the light. Will it be a side effect? Yes, it's always been. Just and I, just the sound of my voice, people tend to like it. Um, I was reluctant to speak at one time. You know, even because of that, I never wanted to be perceived a certain way. It was only once I stopped caring about how I was perceived that I actually stepped into who I was. But that was me reattaining the shadow. Um, you can find me on Facebook, Kilele Kiano, KILELLE You can find me also on Facebook under KunamiKodes. That's KUNAMIKODES. You can find me on Instagram under Culture with a K, Culture 24, the number 24. I'm on Twitter. Of course, I'm on Telegram. Um, and that may expand to a couple other places, but I'm good with that. I'm on TikTok. You know, that's about as far as I'm really gonna go. I like to get information from um, every angle possible. Social media makes that very easy, especially on an international level. When you look at it through the lens of information, it's incredible because you're going to hear a lot of people say, "I don't like this one" or "I don't like that one." Well, it depends on what you're there for. You know, I'm not there to just hang out. You know, I might post you a laugh here or there, but I'm here for information. I'm here to see manifestation because that's the easiest way to keep your finger to the pulse. Aside from that, you just completely unplug. You see.
Well, thank you for that, brother. And thank you for this wonderful interview. You've dropped some beautiful bombs, said so much in a mere 2 hours, packed in 3 hours of interview into 2 hours. Impressive. You have an efficient way of putting your thoughts across. And to those of you that haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, do please go and subscribe to Dr. K. Kalile's YouTube channel because he is going to be putting more content up, and you're going to be seeing more of him at some point and hearing more of him. I'd love for you to put some of your historical knowledge up there. I'm going to make that request for you, that you make some videos about those trains because you have such a lovely speaking voice. Love to hear you telling us about it. You know, because you've got such a measured way of speaking that it's congenial. It's like drinking a lovely cup of tea. It's smooth and it's a strong cup of tea as well. It's not tepid. It's got warmth. It's got heat in it. So thank you so much, brother. Thank all of you that have been here, and it's been amazing as I expected. And the 2 hours flipped by really fast, easily. So we'll probably have to come back onto the hot seat again at some point if you don't mind. And so much love to all of you. And Kalal, I'd love for you to have the last few words, brother.
Thank you again, Franklin. This has been a true honor. I cannot words don't truly express my appreciation. Greatly appreciate you. I wish you all love, peace, and power, everybody within the sound of my voice. Check us out tomorrow on the Ronin Experience, 9 o'clock on YouTube. We will be speaking about a very special interview that is upcoming with David Ewing Jr. Very thankful to have. Shout out to him. Be sure to check out Moon Feather Rising Wednesdays on YouTube at 8 o'clock to truly experience spirit and listen to those intuitive energies. And I want to wish everyone on the round table love, peace, and power, everybody in the chat, everybody who's listening, everybody who's joined, and thank you. Be aware and be you.
And thank you once again for that wonderful sharing, the wonderful expression. And so Dr. K is going to be on the Ronin Experience, and he's going to be on the round table. We're going to be discussing beings, entities, angels, demons, extraterrestrials, extra-dimensionals, interdimensionals, and everything that goes along with this. You know, the idea of heaven and hell. And we'll be branching into illness and health, you know, how it relates to the 7 deadly sins, the 7 great spirits, the guides. They're all going to be wrapped up into an interesting conversation as well on the next roundtable. So Dr. K is going to be all over YouTube this weekend. He's going to be wearing YouTube. YouTube is going to be wearing him. So those of you catch all of his shows. And I'd like to second what was said by Dr. K, by Kalal. He doesn't promote himself, which is why I've been aching. It was Dr. K that made me think I need to start the series of like doing an expose on all the people, because that's like, nobody knows what he does. Come on. People need to see that there's so much going on here with this wonderful human being, and that he's got a lot to share and a lot to offer. Thank you. And thank you all. Have an absolutely gorgeous evening. And the roundtable will be seeing you guys tomorrow, similar time as tonight, just an hour and a half earlier. And so much love to all of you. Big blessings. Om Shanti. And thank you, Brother Kalal. It's been amazing.
Thank you, brother. Love, peace, and power.
My volume went a bit weird there for a moment. So sending you all so much love. Big blessings to you all. I hope you got what you came for. I certainly got what I came for. I enjoyed the show. I enjoyed the interview. Have an absolutely wonderful day, evening, to those of you, wherever you are, be it in the UK, Europe, or America. Om Shanti, Nama Narayana, Alakabam Shiv Shankar. Take care. Keep it sweet.